With Bitcoin over 100K and touching $107,000, the market seems poised for an explosive move. And with the repeal of SAB 121, the third domino has fallen, which is going to lead us to $5 million Bitcoin.
But there are three things that are massive catalysts that cause an acceleration. And I don't think that those three things don't take us to 500,000. They take us to 5 million a coin, right? Those three things are a spot ETF where someone can go ahead and buy $100 million of Bitcoin by a security, an ETF security. I think that's one. Two is your bank is going to custody it for you and lend against it. And three is I can mark it up or mark it down on my balance sheet based on fair value. Pari passu. It'll be pari passu to the way I'd handle Apple stock, or at least that good.
Late last week, the SEC repealed Staff Accounting Bulletin number 121, or SAB 121. This is one of the most important regulatory shifts in the history of Bitcoin. On the surface, this is absolutely a win for Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin's price, which is essentially unlimited at this point.
Day one, SAB 121 is going away, and that is a major catalyst for Bitcoin. You know, I think that Bitcoin can probably get to 500,000 on its own without SAB 121 going away, but it's SAB 121 going away that really makes the upside unlimited.
This is coming from Eric Weiss, the person who orange-pilled Michael Saylor himself. I see the rewards, but I also see the risk. I was 18 when the great financial crisis happened in 2008. Bailouts, bank runs, and a massive loss of trust. And from this collapse, Bitcoin was born. But imagine if all of this was amplified by a currency that can't be printed out of thin air. Welcome to the brave new world post-SAB 121. With SAB 121's repeal, we're on a collision course between Bitcoin's principles and the flaws of the traditional banking system. The rewards will be magnified, but so will the risks, unless you do one simple thing. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go. On the surface, the repeal of SAB 121 is a huge win for Bitcoin. And everybody's getting in on it. It's pretty crazy to think that people like Scottie Pippen are tweeting about the significance of this. This was spotted by my boy Terrence. When SAB 121 was repealed, the assets under management in the spot Bitcoin ETFs hit 121 billion. Pretty ironic. But let me back up. For all of you out there who are like, what the heck is SAB 121? Eric Weiss gives a good description of what it is and why it's important here.
Banks make money by lending out money, right? Fractional reserve banking, right? And the last thing they want to do is have to hold money in the bank itself. And so SAB 121 came from the SEC and Gary Gensler, which said, if banks want to custody Bitcoin or crypto, they have to hold dollar for dollar reserves against it. So if you want to hold $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, you have to hold $1 billion in US dollars in your bank. That's $1 billion that you can't lend out and make money on, right? So no bank is going to do that. It's like a death blow for banks holding crypto.
Let's pause here for a second. I'll be the first one to take sides with Parker Lewis on this. Gary Gensler might have been right. Of course, he was wrong about Bitcoin, but he might have been right that there should be guardrails and safety in place for crypto being custodied by banks. Let's go back to 1971. Haven't we seen what happens when you detach a one-to-one liability or backing of a hard asset to a currency, equity, or token that can be printed ad infinitum on top of it? Oh yeah. That's when Nixon removed us from the gold standard. Hard money was replaced with trust. And this gave governments and banks the ability to create money through loans. And the consequences, inflation, financial crisis, and an ever-expanding debt bubble. If you're watching this online, I have a chart up, and that blue line is the revenue, and that red line is our spending. That budget doesn't balance, and that math don't math. Bitcoin was created as a response to this system. It's hard money, uncorrupted by politics or central banks. We're bringing the challenges and issues and flaws of our current system with rehypothecation and merging it with the principles of unforgeability and limited supply in Bitcoin. Rehypothecation is like lending your house out to 10 different people. It works until everybody shows up with a moving truck. And with Bitcoin's fixed supply, there's no central bank to print any more money if things go south. FTX, BlockFi, Genesis all brought down with rehypothecation and under-collateralized loans. And this is even worse when it's done on crypto and rug pull tokens, which has now been unleashed with the digital trash set stockpile.
This is the crypto EO. We're going to be forming an internal working group to make America the world capital in crypto under your leadership.
Which is really going up, right?
Absolutely.
David, that's for you.
Thanks, sir.
Notice that President Trump didn't say Bitcoin stockpile like he said at the Bitcoin conference. We've widened the aperture to the same tokens and protocols which have gotten people blown up. Case in point, the famed ETH and Bitcoin DeFi protocol, Thorchain, is insolvent. $102 million worth of people's ETH and Bitcoin can be rug pulled if someone with a lot of Rune tokens decides to pull their money out. Now, imagine that same behavior being tied up with the too big to fail banks. This isn't just a crypto problem where you remove the logo off of an arena. This poses systematic risk. This is nothing new. This has been happening since the creation of central banks. I urge you to listen to this 2-minute and 30-second clip from Lynn Alden, which is a masterclass on the problems and shortcomings of central banks and fractional reserve banking.
Today, kind of the main purpose of a central bank, ostensibly, is a lender of last resort. So because fractional reserve banking is inherently unstable, and it's kind of prone where if one bank fails, it's more likely to lead to like a cascade of bank failures. There are periods of time where there's this whole, all the liquidity kind of dries up, and they want someone to be able to come in and say, well, we can lend when no one else can lend. That's kind of the idea of a central bank. But it's become more entrenched over time because in addition to that role, they actually run the foundational ledger for what money is. Like if you say, what is a dollar, right? It's a piece of paper, but what actually is it? It's a direct liability of the Fed. So basically the monetary base of a country is the central bank's liability side. Right. And so we've run this two-tier money system where the base money is the liability of a central bank, and then the broad money are the liabilities of commercial banks. So bank reserves and physical banknotes are direct liabilities of a central bank in most cases. In the United States, it's the Fed. And so that's a really foundational role. Like you literally define what money is. You control how much of it there is, how much base money there is. There are other policies, they don't directly determine, but they heavily influence how much broad money there is. They either accelerate bank lending or reduce bank lending. And they facilitate funding the government, even at times where if they were to go issue bonds, nobody wants to buy them. Central banks buy them. And so they serve multiple roles today. But I think a lot of people are rightly concerned around the centralization aspect, which is to say, if you ask most people, are price controls good? Most people that have a sense of free markets would say no. And yet that's exactly what central banks do. They set the price of money, which is arguably one of the most important prices you could set. It influences everything else. And if they don't set it right, if they don't set it in a way that is like rational, then it has all sorts of distortion effects on the economy. And that's why people get frustrated with it. And it can contribute to booms and busts. I mean, they're supposed to be there to smooth out booms and busts, but they have a tendency to be kind of almost pro-cyclical, where they kind of cause a bust, they cause a boom, they cause a bust, or at least they contribute in a significant way, many would argue.
The distortion of money is the root of societal problems that we have today. So in the future, when you want to borrow against your Bitcoin, remember, you're giving your pristine collateral to a bank, which can rehypothecate your Bitcoin, loan it out, lend it out, and issue to you something that they can create an infinite amount more of, fiat currency. These banks have lent against all sorts of things before, but not Bitcoin. But you know who has? One of the sponsors of our show, Bretton, who's been the leader in Bitcoin lending since 2018. In fact, they've lent out over $6.5 billion worth of loans to tens of thousands of customers and have never lost a single sat of customers' funds. They have all sorts of risk management protocols in place and even offer proof of reserves, which I'm pretty sure that your bank is not willing to do. Not only is the process simple, it takes just 2 minutes to fill out an application and you get currency in dollars or your local currency in less than 24 hours. It's also backed by their reputation. Just look online at what their customers have to say about the product, the process, and the security of it. Go to ledon.io/borrowing to unlock liquidity from your Bitcoin with a responsible Bitcoin partner. That's ledon.io/borrowing. One of the ways that you can prevent yourself from being rug pulled in the eventual collapse of a bank run with the repeal of SAB 121 and them lending against your Bitcoin is by removing your Bitcoin from exchanges by taking self-custody. I wholeheartedly recommend that you get a coach to teach you how to do this properly, privately, securely, and confidently. And you can get one of these coaches at thebitcoinway.com. Members of their team will walk you through 100% proper self-custody so you can remove all counterparty risk by removing your keys from third-party exchanges or custodians like banks with the repeal of SAB 121. Go to thebitcoinway.com and schedule a free consultation with their team. Go to thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin to schedule a free 30-minute consultation with their team. That's thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin to schedule a free 30-minute consultation with their team. So where do we go from here? Bretton Woods 1.0 tied the dollar to gold. Bretton Woods 2.0 tied the fiat currency to nothing in the whims of government, politicians, and central bankers. Now, we're heading towards a Bretton Woods 3.0. Well, according to the new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent.
I do believe this election, there's a big choice, and we are going to decide whether we are going to grow our way out of this debt burden. And I think we can through deregulation, energy independence and dominance in the U.S., and a growth mindset. We can get back to growth. I feel very strongly that this is the last chance to grow our way out of this. I also felt very strongly that we're in the midst of a great realignment, kind of a Bretton Woods realignment coming in terms of global policy, global trade. There's a lot of what I taught at Yale. I've been studying my whole life.
Everyone's talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but I believe this only happens once we become the energy dominant country in the world. Our currency will be backed both by energy and hard assets like Bitcoin. Countries that understand this will lead the next financial era. Without the proper conversation, collaboration, rules, and protocols in place, Preston Pysh believes that we're heading for a crisis, and I agree with him. In this article on Ego Death Capital's website, he lays out some things for Congress to consider. Banning the rehypothecation of Bitcoin. Requiring that banks segregate customer assets. Pretty good idea. Enforcing proof of reserve audits. Having regulatory coordination in place. And here's my favorite. Preventing the sale of a strategic Bitcoin reserve in order to bail out banks. It would be a sad and ultimate irony if Bitcoin, which had in its genesis block, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. If that ended up being the thing to bail out the banks, this would be the ultimate reversal in purpose of Bitcoin itself. Let me end with this. All of the dominoes are falling for explosive movements in Bitcoin's price. Like the SAB 121 repeal, it's happening so much so that Coinbase Brian has now become Bitcoin Brian again.
I think over time we'll see Bitcoin get into the millions, multiple millions price range. I mean, it's being adopted by more and more institutional customers. The ETFs brought in a huge amount of inflow. If we get clear legislation passed in the US, that would be a big milestone. A strategic Bitcoin reserve. If the U.S. took that path, probably the rest of the G20 would follow. In fact,
people like Samson Mow have been on a roll. And with the Trump victory out of the way and Ross being freed from prison, we now have the strategic Bitcoin reserve and an Omega candle as the next bosses, according to Samson. But with the SAB 121 being repealed and added to this list, let's be careful to understand the risks involved with the potential rewards. This can all be mitigated if you take some time to study and the effort and have the wisdom to take self-custody of your Bitcoin. I can't emphasize it enough. Not your keys, not your coins. Sometimes it's good to hear the basics along with huge price predictions. And a great space to sharpen your iron and to hear the basics is by coming down to the BitBlockBoom conference in Dallas, Texas from April 3rd through April 6th. You'll get to hear from some of your favorite speakers in Bitcoin like Parker Lewis, Marty Bent, Guy Swan, Bob Burnett, and me. You also get to learn the basics of Bitcoin, like how do I buy my first Bitcoin? How do I take self-custody of my Bitcoin? What is this Bitcoin mining thing all about? And you're also going to interact and meet some of your favorite Bitcoiners in real life. I, for one, have heard from many people who watch this show that I'm super excited to meet in real life. Get $100 off your all-inclusive ticket by going to bitblockboom.com and entering the promo code BBB25. That's bitblockboom.com, BBB25 at checkout. We can celebrate the victories, but we also need to hear about the risks that come with the reward. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.